Daniel is the hero of the Book of Daniel, a noble Jewish youth of Jerusalem. He is taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and serves the king and his successors with loyalty and ability until the time of the Persian conqueror Cyrus, all the while remaining true to the God of Israel. Most scholars see the book as a cryptic allusion to the reign of the Greek king Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and the broad consensus is that Daniel never existed. 6 cities claim Daniel's tomb, the most famous being that in Susa at a site known as Shush-e Daniyal. He is not a prophet in Judaism, but the rabbis reckoned him to be the most distinguished member of the Babylonian diaspora, unsurpassed in piety and good deeds, firm in his adherence to the law despite being surrounded by enemies who sought his ruin, and in the first few centuries CE they wrote down the many legends that had grown up around his name. The various branches of the Christian Church do recognize him as a prophet, and although he is not mentioned in the Quran, Muslim sources describe him as a Nabi, a saintly and righteous man. Background: Daniel's name means, "God is my judge," while the best-known Daniel is the hero of the Book of Daniel who interprets dreams and receives apocalyptic visions. The Bible also briefly mentions 3 other individuals of this name. The Book of Ezekiel refers to a legendary Daniel famed for wisdom and righteousness. In chapter 20, Ezekiel says of the sinful land of Israel that, even if these 3, Noah, Daniel and Job, were in it, they would deliver but their own lives by the righteousness. Quote, in chapter 28, Ezekiel taunts the king of Tyre, asking rhetorically, "Art thou wiser than Daniel?" Quote, it is possible that the author of the Book of Daniel chose the name Daniel for his hero because of his reputation. The legendary Daniel, known from long ago but still remembered as an exemplary character, serves as the principal human hero in the biblical book that now bears his name. Quote, Ezra chapter 8 verse 2 mentions a priest named Daniel who went from Babylon to Jerusalem with Ezra. Daniel is a son of David mentioned at 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1. Daniel is also the name of a figure in the Akkad legend from Ugarit. This legendary Daniel is known for his righteousness and wisdom and a follower of the god El, who made his will known through dreams and visions. It is unlikely that Ezekiel knew the far older Canaanite legend, but it seems reasonable to suppose that some connection exists between the two. The authors of the tales in the first half the Book of Daniel were likely also unaware of the Ugaritic Daniel and probably took the name of their hero from Ezekiel. The author of the visions in the second half in turn took his hero's name from the tales. The Tales and Visions of Daniel. Overview: the Book of Daniel, like Ruth and Esther, is historical fiction. It begins with an introduction telling how Daniel and his companions came to be in Babylon, followed by a set of tales set in the Babylonian and Persian courts, followed in turn by a set of visions in which Daniel sees the remote future of the world and of Israel. The tales in chapters 1 to 6 can be dated to the 3rd or early 2nd centuries BCE. It is generally accepted that these were expanded by the addition of the visions in chapters 8 to 12 between 167 and 164 BCE. The introductory verses tell how, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, Daniel and his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were among the young Jewish nobility carried off to Babylon following the city's capture by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. This is the first of several historical problems in the Book of Daniel, since the meticulous Babylonian chronicles make no mention of an attack on Jerusalem before 598 BCE. Daniel and his 3 friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are chosen for their intellect and beauty to be trained in the Babylonian court, and to this end they are given new names. Daniel is given the Babylonian name Belteshazzar, while his companions are given the Babylonian names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Abednego. The Tales Daniel chapters 1-6 contains 6 tales, but the cycle was once larger, as confirmed by the existence of additional tales in the Greek version of the book. Daniel is presented as a new Joseph, an accomplished administrator, an interpreter of dreams to kings, a man of wisdom that suits him to high position at court. In short, the Daniel of the first half of the book is a figure from the Jewish wisdom tradition, with no apparent connection to the apocalyptic visions of the second half. The Six Dailies are Daniel and his friends at the court of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's dream of 4 kingdoms, the fiery furnace, the humbling of Nebuchadnezzar, the tale of Belshazzar's feast, or the writing on the wall, and Daniel in the lion's den. They can be briefly summarized as follows. Daniel and his friends refused the food and wine provided by the king of Babylon for fear that they might be defiled. They receive wisdom from God, and surpass all the magicians and enchanters of the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a giant statue made of 4 metals, which is smashed by a stone from heaven. Daniel alone is able to explain it. The dream signifies 4 kingdoms, of which Babylon is the first, but God will destroy them and replace them with his own kingdom. The fiery furnace. Daniel does not appear in the story of the fiery furnace, which features only his 3 friends. Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a great tree that shelters all the world and of a heavenly figure who decrees that the tree will be destroyed. Daniel interprets the dream, and the king is condemned to eat grass like an ox until he accepts the sovereignty of God. King Belshazzar uses the vessels from the temple for his feast. A supernatural hand appears and writes a mysterious message on the wall, which only Daniel can interpret. It tells the king that his kingdom will be given to the Medes and Persians. King Darius appoints Daniel to high authority, and jealous enemies attempt to destroy him with an accusation that he worships God instead of the king. Daniel is thrown into a den of lions, but an angel saves him. His accusers are destroyed, and Daniel is restored to his position. The visions chapters 7-12 are a series of apocalyptic visions and their angelic explanations of which Daniel is the recipient. A notable difference between the events and the visions is that while the events are God's messages to Daniel, the visions are in the first person. At the same time, while Daniel has been an active participant in the events, in the visions he is the passive recipient. The 4 visions are the beasts from the sea and the Son of Man, the goat and the ram, Daniel's prayer and the time of desolation, and the final revelation. 4 beasts come out of the sea, the last with 10 horns. An 11th horn grows and achieves dominion over the earth. The Ancient of Days gives dominion to one like a Son of Man. An angel interprets the vision. A ram with 2 horns is attacked by a goat with 1 horn. The 1 horn breaks and is replaced by 4. A little horn arises and attacks the people of God and the temple. Daniel is informed how long the little horn's dominion will endure. Daniel is troubled to read in Jeremiah that the people of God must endure exile for 70 years. He prays and asks God how long his people must remain in exile. An angel explains that the hidden meaning was 7 times 70 years. A vision of the end of days. Daniel sees a broad sweep of history culminating in a struggle between the king of the north and the king of the south. The people of God suffer terribly, but in the end they will be vindicated and God's own kingdom will be established on earth. Additional tales. The Greek text of Daniel contains 3 additional tales, 2 of which feature Daniel. Susanna tells how Daniel saves the reputation of a young Jewish girl when 2 lecherous Jewish elders condemn her to death. supposedly for unchastity, but actually because she resisted their advances. Daniel's clever cross-examination unmasks their evil and leads to the deaths. The story is unique in that the villains are Jews instead of heathens. It may have been written as a polemic by the Pharisees against the Sadducees, who, according to their opponents, were abusing the control of the courts. Bel and the Dragon consists of 2 episodes. In the first, Daniel exposes the deceptions of the heathen priests, who have been pretending that their idols eat and drink. In the second, Daniel destroys a giant serpent that Cyrus believes to be a god. The Babylonians revolt. Cyrus imprisons Daniel without food. The prophet Habakkuk miraculously feeds him, and Cyrus repents. Death and Tomb of Daniel. The last mention of Daniel in the Book of Daniel is in the 3rd year of Cyrus. Rabbinic sources suppose that he was still alive during the reign of the Persian king Ahasuerus when he was killed by Haman, the wicked prime minister of Ahasuerus. The 1st century Jewish writer Josephus reported that Daniel's body lay in a tower in Ecbatana in Parthia, alongside the bodies of the kings of the Medes and Persians. Later Jewish authorities said he was buried in Susa, and that near his house were hidden the vessels from the Temple of Solomon. Muslim sources reported that the Muslims had discovered his body, or possibly only a box containing his nerves and veins, together with a book, a jar of fat, and a signet ring engraved with the image of a man being licked by 2 lions. The corpse was reburied, and those who buried it decapitated to prevent them revealing the spot. Today 6 cities claim Daniel's tomb: Babylon, Kirkuk and Muqtadiya in Iraq, Susa and Malamir in Iran, and Samarkand in Uzbekistan. The most famous is that in Susa, at a site known as Shush-e Daniyal. According to Jewish tradition, the rich and poor of the city quarreled over possession of the body, and the bier was therefore suspended from a chain over the center of the river. A house of prayer open to all who believed in God was built nearby, and fishing was prohibited for a certain distance up and down the river. Fish that swam in that section of the river had heads that glinted like gold, and ungodly persons who entered the sacred precinct would miraculously drown in the river. To this day the tomb is a popular site of pilgrimage. Daniel in later tradition. Judaism Daniel is not a prophet in Judaism. Prophecy is reckoned to have ended with Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. In the Hebrew Bible his book is not included under the prophets, perhaps because its content does not match the prophetic books, but nevertheless the 8 copies found among the Dead Sea Scrolls and the additional tales of the Greek text are a testament to Daniel's popularity in ancient times. The Jewish rabbis of the 1st millennium CE reckoned Daniel to be the most distinguished member of the Babylonian diaspora, unsurpassed in piety and good deeds, firm in his adherence to the law despite being surrounded by enemies who sought his ruin, and in the first few centuries CE they wrote down the legends that he had grown up around his name. His captivity was foretold by the prophet Isaiah to King Hezekiah in these words, "They shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." Quote, this misfortune was turned to a blessing when Daniel and his 3 companions were able to show the mutilated bodies to Nebuchadnezzar and so prove their innocence of charges of leading an unchaste life. Daniel kept the welfare of Nebuchadnezzar in mind continually, and when the king was condemned by God to live as a beast for a certain period, Daniel prayed that the period of punishment should be shortened, and his prayer was granted. When Nebuchadnezzar was dying, he wished to include Daniel among his heirs, but Daniel refused the honor, saying that he could not leave the inheritance inheritance of his forefathers for that of the uncircumcised. Daniel also restored the sight of King Darius, who had wrongly thrown the pious Daniel into prison on false charges, upon which many converted to Judaism. Christianity. The prophet is commemorated in the Coptic Church on the 23rd day of the Coptic month of Baramhat. On the Eastern Orthodox liturgical calendar, the feast days celebrating St. Daniel the prophet together with the three young men falls on December 17th, on the Sunday of the Holy Forefathers, and on the Sunday before Nativity. Daniel's prophecy regarding the stone which smashed the idol is often used in Orthodox hymns as a metaphor for the incarnation, the stone cut out being symbolic of the Logos, and the fact that it was cut without hands being symbolic of the virgin birth. Thus the hymns will refer to the Theotokos as the uncut mountain. The Roman Catholic Church commemorates St. Daniel in the Roman Martyrology on July 21st. Some local liturgical calendars of dioceses also list his feast, sometimes on July 21st and sometimes on another day. For example, the Archdiocese of Gorizia celebrates the feast of Saint Daniel, prophet and confessor, on September 11th. The reading of the Mass is taken from the Book of Daniel, chapter 14, the gradual from Psalm chapter 91, the Alleluia verse from the Epistle of James chapter 1, and the Gospel from Matthew chapter 24. The calendar of saints of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod commemorates Daniel, together with the three young men, on December 17th. Islam. Daniel is not mentioned in the Quran, but there are accounts of his prophethood in later Muslim literature. He was carried off to Babylon after the destruction of Jerusalem, where he was rescued from lions with the aid of the prophet Jeremiah. Another source retells how Daniel interpreted the king's dream of a statue made of four metals destroyed by a rock from heaven. All sources, both classical and modern, describe Daniel as a saintly and righteous man. Abdullah Yusuf Ali in his Quranic commentaries says, Daniel was a righteous man of princely lineage and lived about 620 to 538 BC. He was carried off to Babylon in 605 B.C. by Nebuchadnezzar the Assyrian, but was still living when Assyria was overthrown by the Medes and Persians. In spite of the captivity of the Jews, Daniel enjoyed the highest offices of state at Babylon, but he was ever true to Jerusalem. His enemies got a penal law passed against anyone who asked a petition of any god or man for 30 days, except the Persian king. But Daniel continued true to Jerusalem. His windows being open in his chambers towards Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Baha'i. Daniel is considered a minor prophet in the teachings of the Baha'i faith. Some Baha'i converts introduced the principle of reincarnation, specifically that of Daniel and John. Bibliography. Collins, John J. Daniel, with an introduction to apocalyptic literature. Edmonds. Collins, John J. Daniel. In Van der Toorn, Carol, Becking, Bob, Van der Horst, Peter Willem. Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. Edmonds. Coogan, Michael. The Old Testament, a very short introduction. Oxford University Press. Day, John. The Daniel of Ugarit and Ezekiel and the hero of the Book of Daniel. Vetus Testamentum. 30. Dukan Jacques. Secrets of Daniel. Wisdom and Dreams of a Jewish Prince in Exile. Review and Herald Pub Association. Ginsberg, Lewis. The Legends of the Jews. JHU Press. Nogel, Scott B. Wheeler, Brannan M. Historical Dictionary of Prophets in Islam and Judaism. Scarecrow Press. Reddit, Paul L. Introduction to the Prophets. Edmonds. Reed, Stephen Breck. Daniel, Book of. In Friedman, David Noel. Myers, Alan C. Edmonds Dictionary of the Bible. Edmonds. SEOW, CL. Daniel, Westminster John Knox Press, Spencer, Richard A. Additions to Daniel, in Mills, Watson E. Wilson, Richard F. The Deuterocanonicals, Apocrypha, Mercer University Press, Stone, Michael E. Ancient Judaism, New Visions and Views, Edmonds, Towner, Wayne Sibley, Daniel, Westminster John Knox Press, Walton, John J. Ancient Israelite Literature in its Cultural Context, Zondervan, Wesleyus Jan Wim. The Writing of Daniel, in Collins, John J. Flint, Peter W. Van Epps, Cameron. The Book of Daniel, Composition and Reception, Brill.